this is Josh with GSA Focus. Did you know that $2.3 billion in fines were incurred by government contractors last year? 80% of government contractors incurred fines. That's a staggering number. This is only looking to get worse. Department of Labor is hiring new auditors and everything is about to go haywire. So I actually interviewed Randy Leaker at AXIM Fringe Solutions Group. He is the Vice President of Sales over there, where we cover the topics of compliance and efficiency within the government space. So there is a lot you will want to hear on this interview. Randy goes really into detail, spills the beans quite a bit, helps give you a couple pointers on how to prepare for your compliance. People, do not let your compliance issues catch up with you. It's a ticking time bomb. So very important. I hope you enjoy this interview. If you have any questions, I will have my information and Randy's information below, and hope you enjoy it. Take care. Go to the All right, I'm here today with Randy. Randy is here with the AXIM Fringe Solutions Group. Do you just go by AXIM usually?
Correct.
Okay, very cool. And Randy's coming to us from Phoenix today. He is, looks like well-educated with an MBA, lots of years of experience. As I'm going through your LinkedIn page, you've jumped around industries, which is always cool. That means you kind of are a jack of all trades, which is hopefully I think going into compliance and efficiency is always going to be helpful, especially knowing different industries and coming at it from specific I guess nuances within those industries. So that's kind of the introduction there. Vice President of Sales at AXIM. And today our main topic is really going to be compliance. That's what AXIM Fringe Solutions focuses on, with kind of a sub topic of efficiency, how to be more efficient. And of course, this all relates to, as always, government contracting and of course, small businesses. That's who we care about here at GSA Focus. So Randy, I'll kind of turn it over to you. If I missed anything there in the introduction, or you want to kind of go into your company's story, your story, or anything like that.
No, I appreciate that. No, it's one of those to where you said it perfectly. I've been in so many different capacities over the past 25, 30 years, always in the insurance and financial services side of things. Last 10 years have been specifically serving the government contracting sector, which has really allowed me to build a wide swath of understanding what these small business owners really go through, which is awesome. We at AXIM have been around for about the same amount of time, about 10, 12 years. And really we started because our CEO, which was based in Baltimore, Maryland at that time, was serving government contractors who did government work. And the complexities that these small business owners ran into impacted the medical solutions that he could bring to the table. And so AXIM is really focused around helping small business owners and government contractors specifically to really understand the contracts, because compliance is a major issue that comes into it, which exposes many different risks upon these government contractors. So our whole notion is to be a consultant to the government contractors and the partners who serve them.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for that synopsis. So let's jump right in. I'm completely paying attention, but I am going to be taking some notes as you're talking. I want this to turn into a pretty, helpful blog post as well. So
Sure.
As my eyes are drifting around, I'm not checking my, Twitter feed or anything like that. So the first thing I wanted to really hit on was really just, I'm a numbers guy. I like statistics. So when it relates to compliance, can you hit me with any statistics that you know of that are kind of telling, that tell a really good story, bring a narrative before us, and specifically for a small business in getting into government contracting, or maybe they're already in the government contracting space. But what do they need to know statistic wise about risk, about compliance in this industry?
Great question. It really starts with exposure, period. So in many cases, and I'll answer your question with some statistics here in just 2 seconds, but we get contacted in really 2 points of time in the government contracting space. One, you have a newer company who just won their first or second or third bid. So early on in the process, they work with a consultant out there. They win the bid and they go, yes, this is exciting. What do I do now? And they go, oh, I don't know. And so they finagle something. They come up with a solution to think that they're in compliance, but it brings a lot of manual work to their administrative staff on that. Or we get contacted after the fact, after they've been through an audit, because they thought they had things in place when they really didn't. And now it's that, oh man moment where how do I unroll that? So, we run into this a lot when it comes to that compliance. So to your exact question, last year during a pandemic year, there were $3.2 billion worth of fines and back pays that were allocated because of a increase in audits, which is a record year from the DOL. On top of that, 80% of all government contractors who were audited actually incurred a fine, which means so many of these contractors who are out there who thought they were doing the right things or had processes in place really aren't doing it the right way. And that's evidenced by that. Unfortunately, as we look at the coming years, it's only going to get worse and it's not going to get better, because the DOL this year alone is hiring 250 new auditors to come join their forces, which is going to lead to increased scrutiny, which is going to lead to increased audits, purely from the standpoint of there's more eyes looking at it from here. The other part that is concerning about that is when you're bringing in new people like that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, Josh. I mean, government contracting can be complex. And so you're bringing a new group of auditors into the mix who may not have the same knowledge base. Oh my goodness, it could be really staggering, the impact on many of these small business owners. So the whole notion is, this is not going away. Compliance is going to be here for the foreseeable future and beyond.
Yeah. Okay. What agency did you say that was hiring?
The DOL, which is the Department of Labor,
Department
who
of Labor
handles most of the audits, correct?
When they hire, when there's such a hiring surge like that, is there a lag time normally for training and all that, or do they usually hit the ground running and kind of just throw them all in?
Unfortunately, in many cases, it's a trial by fire, or just jump in with beat first and you learn as you go through the process. Yes, there is some training that comes with it from here. So, but as well as I do, it really is something that you learn a lot by just getting into it and doing the audits, which exposes a lot. Now, the challenge with that is that the impact on the employers themselves. So these government contractors, where an audit normally would take 90 days to 6 months to complete, that's going to extend that period where it's maybe 6 months to a year type of an audit process, which is a huge time burden to many of these government contractors or people who are already strapped for time. So it's got a significant impact. Your guess is as good as mine, but it's going to be significant.
Okay. All right. Well, like you had said earlier with exposure, you said there were two different types, kind of the newer companies that are kind of in the preparation mode. And I'm sure different varieties, some of them are probably at a 0%, just not audits, a future audit or compliance isn't on their radar at all. And then there's probably the very risk averse folks that are, assembling a legal team and putting all of the checklists and protocols and everything in place. They're building something for the just in case scenarios. Just out of curiosity, I mean, do you have just a ballpark figure of who's on one side? What are the percentages? Are most companies kind of fly by the seat of your pants? If we get audited, we'll figure it out. or it seems like the majority would be in that mode. And then, but I am curious, you know, what roughly what percentage of companies do you think are in the well prepared, you know, let's prepare first kind of bucket?
Just my hypothesis, and I don't have a ton of data to support, but this is just my experience over the last 10 plus years. It's about 5% of the companies who are really prepared for that, which means 95% are just like you said. They may not be flying by night to that extreme, but they're definitely exposed because it's a manual process that they have in place. And I can give you examples of that in the past. One company that I'll reference and won't share any names, but they had 12 Service Contract Act acts in place. And they felt everything was going great. When we did the deep dive, 10 of the 12 were actually out of compliance. Thank goodness we were able to catch it beforehand, but A, they thought they were doing everything properly. B, it was all manual from that side of things. And C, it was something that just had processes and procedures they had put in place 10 years ago were still being used today without understanding the impact of that on those current contracts. And so, you know, it turned out to be a great story for everybody. But that's just a perfect example of somebody who, you know, while they're not flying by night, they thought they had processes, but because they haven't grown with the organization and adapted, they were exposed. So yeah, I would say 5% fully prepared, have teams that do this. And honestly, we're talking about the large entities that are out there as well.
Okay. Are the larger companies typically more at risk just because they're larger, more, I guess, more exposure, more can go wrong, that kind of thing? Or are they usually better off because they have the budget to kind of throw towards compliance?
That's exactly right. In most cases, they're in good shape because they have the bodies and the resources. So even if there are manual processes, which is true in some of those cases, because when we talk about technology, that's a big weakness for us as an organ or as an industry. They have enough checks and balances to be able to make sure that the data output is justified and is correct, and they can do that. But they're throwing lots of money and administrative burden to that by having those departments themselves. But to your point, yeah, in most cases, they're okay because they have the resources to it.
Got it. Got it. So it is the small business that's usually more at risk.
Yep.
All right. So let's kind of maybe jump into helping small businesses. So what are some of the major compliance areas or topics that are worth discussing, you know, a top 5 or something like that? You don't have to stick to 5, but anything that comes to mind, kind of like, I'm sure you have segments when you onboard a new customer and you say, we're going to check this, we're going to check that, that, and that.
Yep.
So
Great question. Yep, absolutely. So first and foremost, it really does depend upon the type of government contract that they have. So what we find is there is a subsect who works on just Service Contract Act contracts, or just GSA contracts, or just ATSA type contracts. Regardless, they'll focus on those. Those are relatively easy because you have the pitfalls that come into it from here. And you know the common mistakes that happen in those places. The challenge becomes is when you have a contractor who works as a sub and a prime and starts working on different types of contracts, be it an SCA with some Davis-Bacon work, to have collective bargaining, which brings in the Taft-Hartley and the unions aspect of things. So the compliance issue number one is what types of contracts are they working on and what is required by those particular contracts. Davis-Bacon is pretty straightforward in the fact that you have a base wage that you have to pay, and you have your wage determination, your fringes that you have to pay, and how it's allocated from here. We'll talk about some of the pain points around that in just a second. Service contract is a much deeper project because it's very spelled out, but it's 75 pages worth of stuff that you have to do and provide, services that you have to do, insurance that comes into it, and then how those fringes are administered from here. The Most complex, of course, is when you bring the unions into the mix and you get the collective bargain programs.
Yeah.
You get the P3s out west here, where you got the public and privates aspect of things. So compliance issue number one is around what types of contracts that you have, and all of them together. That leads to the second part of it, which is the type of insurance programs that you're required to. One of the issues with the company I referenced before was the fact that they were providing medical coverage, but they didn't read deep enough and provide the short-term, long-term disability that was required to by the contracts as well, which means they were out of compliance from just the insurance side of things. So the types of insurance products that these folks are required to provide is another big key with that. The third big is how the fringe allocations are being administered. Some people will choose to pay it in cash, which is perfectly acceptable. There are some tax burdens that come into it with the company and how that impacts the business as a whole from a profitability standpoint of things, to the tune pretty significantly depending upon the company. But paying it out in cash is perfectly acceptable, as long as those dollars are perfectly allocated and tracked from to the employee level, down to the benefits provided, down to the hours that are worked and the fees that are associated with it. So there's a lot of complexity that comes in with the fringe aspect of things because of the administration of those fringes from here. The fourth component is just pure tracking. So again, knowing these DOL auditors are coming in and looking for certain aspects of that. Like I'd mentioned before with the administration of those fringes, they're looking for that allocation down to the employee, down to the hours worked, down to the benefits that are provided. So transparency is a huge key when it comes into those DOL audits. Because they are looking very specifically and very in-depthly when it comes to it from here. And it's leads into the last key point, which is back records. Unfortunately, you would hope that they would just look at a short period of time to justify, but when they're doing these audits, they're doing audits back years in arrears. So it's not just what you have today going forward, it's going back and impact on that. So these audits will really open up a can of worms that in many cases will really significantly impact if they're not tracking those data back multiple years. You're on mute there, Josh.
Thanks. Sorry.
I do that all the time.
So yeah, that's a lot, only four, points there, but within each one is quite a bit. And then, yeah, that fourth one of tracking, I'd imagine that's where it's kind of where the money's made, right? The ability to track everything, keep good records, and all of that.
Well, and to that point, I had a company I knew back in Los Angeles who, unfortunately, it was a family-owned business, and he let his daughter, like many contractors do, handle the books, and he trusted her, and she did a great job, but it wasn't as deep as need be, and unfortunately, that cost the business because of exactly that. And so, to your point, it's just tracking is so very key,
Yeah.
even going back in the arrears.
Yeah. So that's great, and thanks for kind of going through those areas. What's your approach, and what is the approach the small business should take? I mean, you could go through 70 pages of boilerplate, maybe even up to 300-400 pages of boilerplate on a government contract, and sift out all of the gold. What do we need to track? What are the terms here? What are the terms and conditions? And write a big checklist and then do everything. But yeah, like you'd mentioned before, that's just bodies, and you can't just throw money into it, into these contracts, because they're competitively bid.
That's
so
right.
It's kind of like your small businesses, and large businesses are as well, that we all you know, everybody plays the same game, but small businesses have a little bit of a, you know, burden in that they don't have the manpower to pull all of that out and do that, you know, and that brings on the risk, obviously. So yeah, well, if you're talking to a small business owner, and let's say they're starting out, maybe they just landed their first government contract. What's the approach? What's the best approach to basically sleep good at night? For, you know, if you're in that position.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, when we come in and meet with a government contractor, we really ask a lot about the structure of the organization first, understanding the technology that they have in place, whether they're using multiple different systems to track payroll, to track time and attendance, whether it's a manual process, whether it's automated using some of the technologies. That all has a significant impact on the contracts itself and how you administer that. We understand, is there one centralized person who is in charge of government contracts, and how that individual works with the business as a whole. So we start with analyzing that operation, and then understanding where they're going for. Because if it's a individual, like you just said, who won their first job and they stumbled into it and they're doing a job, but they never want to do contracts going forward, that's a whole different situation than somebody who really sees this as a growth model for their organization, which absolutely can be. So the first start is understanding their operations and how that fits into where they want to go as an organization. There are opportunities out there to create synergies and connect systems to automate a lot of those government contracts from that standpoint. But so that's why you ask the questions around the technology and the support side of things. Once we have that figured out, then you look at the contracts themselves and really honing in on what are the services that are expected. How am I going to pay those fringes out? I can't tell you enough how even with the large organizations, the vast majority of the contractors out there decide to pay those fringes in cash without fully understanding the impact to the profitability of the business. So you alluded to it before, in this space, profit is a key component. In many cases, you're talking single digits of profit if you have anything less than 1%, so anytime you can increase it by 1% or 2 or 3, or sometimes, as high as 10, and really allocate those dollars correctly, could really bring into helping the organization as a whole grow, which is a beauty part of it. So it's one, looking at the operations, understanding how it fits towards their dream state, and then helping them make the right decisions around the contracts themselves. Because you're right, at the end of the day, they can check a whole bunch of boxes. If it's the only job they have, great, it's easy. Those boxes will help them and keep them in compliance. But what happens when they win the second or the third or the 15th, depending upon from here?
Yeah. Okay, that's great. How about, let's jump into the position of a small business owner who maybe has a few different contracts, and they get that terrible call from Department of Labor. We're going to audit you. What are they going to experience over the next few months and perhaps half a year?
You are going to find that auditor is going to want to spend time in your office, and they're going to want to look at anything and everything regarding your business. So you would think that they would focus predominantly just on government contracting, but that will spill over into the other parts of your business as well. So be prepared to provide documentation out the wazoo. That's what they're looking for. And they want it down to not just the organization for the last month. They're going back in arrears, year, 2, 3, sometimes 5 years, depending upon what they find. But just understand that they're looking for fully transparent and fully in-depth type of data points from here. So it's all going to be very, very data driven, which is kind of a challenge in and of itself. So the first thing I would do is, if that situation comes up, is start digging into your documents first and foremost. Secondly, reach out for help. Don't try to go through the audit support on your own. There are resources out there that can help people through that process. Don't do it alone, I guess, is my biggest recommendation. Ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then let's talk about penalties. What can be expected if, if what on a contract, I know there's a lot of different, variants. There's $1 million contract, there's $100 million contract and all that. But what if you could give generalities on what somebody that's coming in from an audit can expect as far as penalties? What does a slap on the wrist look like? What does a death penalty look like? You know what I mean?
Great question. Absolutely. And you're right. It totally depends on the type of contract, the type of infraction, whether you're a first time offender, whether this is your 15th time offending, whether it was a one-time oops in the system that just got dropped, or if it's repeated throughout the process. So there's a lot of variables that come into play from here. But to your point, from kind of the ranges, if it's first time you made an oops, you self-corrected, you recognized it, you went and proactively went to them from here, it's really going to be as simple as you pay the back pays, make the adjustments, and you're on down the road. That's the ideal situation. You just fix it and it's done and over with. If it came out, same thing, a little bit more where they recognized it, but it's your first time, it was a one-time deal, it was just something that happened, there'll be a slight penalty assigned to it, couple grand, but you fixed it, it's on down the road and everybody's happy. Unfortunately, from there all the way to essentially the death sentence, the death sentence is you can no longer work on any government contracts whatsoever for a minimum of 3 years. So if you are a company who has been repeatedly, making bad choices and impacting different things, and it wasn't a process part of it, it can be as significant as you're no longer able to work in government contracts for a minimum 3-year period, if not lifetime ban in some cases.
Okay. Now, are all audits from DOL, or are there any other kind of audits that are noteworthy?
There are other audits that come into play as well. Purely, and this comes from my background with the benefits and retirement side of things as well. There are audits that come from that side of it as well. So ABISA is one that does a lot with the medical and the retirement side of it. The SECs, if I can spit that out, can actually do audits as well. Now, in most cases, those aren't impacting small businesses as much. But with that being said, we're seeing lawsuits and we're seeing audits from the university side of things. Duke University was audited a couple of years ago and was involved in a lawsuit from that side of it, purely due to excessive fees from that on the 401k plan. So really the whole notion is there's always going to be some risk when we talk about the benefit programs that you're putting in place, which is why it's so important for many of these folks to do their fiduciary liability or protect themselves by doing their fiduciary responsibility and going and sending their benefits programs out to bid, because that can be exposed, especially if you're one of the larger government contractors that are out there, because it's coming downhill.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's a pretty exhaustive jump through audits, compliance, and all that stuff. Let's switch topics slightly over to efficiency. So what does AXIM help with on the efficiency side of things? Is there kind of a rundown you could give me of just the handful of efficiency topics or buckets that you help out with?
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. So the big thing we find with a lot of small business owners is that they piecemeal their technology solutions. And it creates this vacuum of data connectivity. So for example, you're going to have somebody who will have a payroll system. Then you may have a separate time and attendance tool. Then you may have your ERP system that tracks all of your resources and your company trucks and labor and that type of stuff, so you can bid better. Then you may have a CRM system that is kind of your customer relationship type of things. But unfortunately, none of it is all connected. Rarely there's one system, unless you are a massive government contractor who buys the top of the line Cadillac system. Most companies are not able to connect all of that. So when we've come in, one of the things that Jim, our owner, recognized is the biggest pain for doing government contracting is that each of your systems do something different. We at AXIM have built our system to start with the technology, which allows us to create a full 360 integration into your payroll and time and attendance, which allows us to pull the data from the contract management aspect of things to manage the fringes, which then connects into the benefits side of the business, so we can properly allocate those dollars to the carriers, which reduces administrative burden from that standpoint of things. So we've really looked at ourselves as, what can we do to connect the dots to give these government contractors the ability to create that efficiency and make themselves smarter, while we're able to help them bid better on the jobs that they're going after, while we keep them in compliance. And so for us, it all starts with that technology and then blends out from there.
Okay. Yeah, tell me a little bit about your technology. Is it I'm assuming it's software. Is it kind of a proprietary software tool that AXIM's developed?
Yep.
And you deploy it, you train on it. Is that kind of the biggest part of your efficiency side of things? It seems like it goes a lot into, or overlaps quite a bit with just general compliance preparation.
Yep.
So would you say those are basically the same defined term?
I think you're pretty close with that, yes.
Okay.
The other I would add to that is the reporting aspect of things. And so you hit it perfectly from here. We've found in the studies that we've done that most average size government contractors spend 30 to 35 hours a week doing compliance type of work tied to government contracts. Now, if you're 1,000-person company, it's probably more than that. But the reality is think of 30 to 35 hours per week on average. What we're able to do with our technology is bring that into place, which reduces that down considerably. So now you're spending, 4 or 5 hours a week, and really it's more about maintaining the data and the integrity, dealing with employee changes, adds terms, deletes, tweaks to benefit programs, that type of stuff, which frees up a ton of time from an administrative standpoint of things, which allows these business owners to redirect some of those labor hours to more revenue producing type activities. Secondarily, by doing that and having all of those data points in one place, you're able to bid smarter, like I'd mentioned before. So you understand what those resources are and how you can bid a little bit better on the labor side of things, which will increase your profit margins, or again, allow you to be more aggressive on those bills. And then lastly, the point is having these reports at their fingertips. So you need a report to send to the DIR in California, as an example. Great. You're able to pull that directly from our system and use it however you need be from here. Your management wants a report about the allocation of fringe dollars. Great. You're able to pull that. You have access to that 24/7, 365. So the efficiency side definitely starts with the technology, but gives them the ability to run these reports and pull the needs that they have based upon their needs as a small business. Awesome.
So yeah, I think that pretty much that's a fantastic run through. If I was a small business, which I am, but if I was a government contracting, if you're looking to get into it, or maybe already inside that game, but looking to maybe hedge some of the compliance issues that might pop up, I think a chill runs down people's spines sometimes when they actually do pick up these solicitations or RFQs and start seeing what they're agreeing to. It's not just cashing a check and doing some work. It's there's so much more to it.
You
So
are so right.
this has been a great kind of, I'd say, just short and sweet introduction to all of that. And I know I learned a ton, and I appreciate your time on this.
My pleasure.
Before we go, I wanted to, going through your site, one of my favorite pages was you had a page on there with a lot of I think there were case studies, there were infographics, all that stuff. I definitely, anybody watching this, I'd say go to AXIM's website and look through those. There was a checklist on there, which is a pretty cool place to start for sure. Anything else that you think needs to be said, Randy, before we close out and wrap up?
The one thing I would encourage people to do is really dig into their operation as a whole and understand that decisions that were made 10, 15, 20 years ago, revisit those decisions and really think back into how it's going to impact your business, not only today, but 5 years down the line. Because the biggest mistake I see a lot of folks make is, well, we've been doing this way for many years. Well, you may have gotten away with it once or twice, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get away with it the next time around. And so looking at your business from a holistic standpoint, understanding where you are, and then really solving those pain points from that standpoint. One of the benefits of COVID was it gave a lot of small business owners time to dive into their operations, which has allowed them to improve their efficiencies and be more effective in the government contracting sector. If you haven't done that, we encourage you guys to do that now, because I get this all the time. And again, one last example was a company who does cleaning, who they have been in the government sector for the last 28 years, I guess it is from here. And they've always managed the fringes a certain way. And come to find out, they're way out of compliant because they didn't take into account the ACA changes that happened 3 or 4 years ago. So now all of a sudden, because somebody made a decision 25 years ago, they're having to deal with the impact of that today. So look at your operation, understand how you're administering these government contracts, and really ask the right questions, dig deep, and you can create some really great synergies and bring in some operational efficiencies from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I'd say at least a quarter, at the very minimum, twice a year, to just have a little session and review processes and everything. And what that also does inadvertently is it kind of shifts your brain to be a little bit more compliance thinking, so that as you read stuff in the news or trade articles or anything that comes up on some pretty big compliance changes, and things change all the time, you can actually filter that through and think about your processes and if there is going to be an impact. And sometimes sometimes there's a big impact and you didn't find out about it till it was too late. And that's unfortunately auditors don't really take that as they don't take that into consideration too much. I didn't know, it's not your job is to know. You sign the dotted line and you cash the check. Your job is to know.
That's right.
So
it's like my first year of law attorney, and I'm not a lawyer by any means, but when I was back in college, she made a comment about how the ignorance is bliss doesn't apply in law, and it's so true. You can't say I didn't know. It's up to us to make sure we dig into it.
Yeah.
There's resources.
There are, yeah, and it's oftentimes at the bottom of the list.
Yes, it is.
Needs to pop up to the top sometimes.
Yes, it does. Like you said, once or twice a year, it's great just to do a deep dive, dig into it from here, especially with as much money that is coming from the government now, especially in today's day and age. Whatever the number ends up, it's going to be roughly $1 trillion worth of money going to government projects, infrastructure type programs. So take advantage of it.
Yeah. Well, Randy, thanks for your time here today. I'm going to
Josh,
wrap
my
this
pleasure.
up. And again, this is Randy with AXIM Fringe Solutions Group, LLC. I'm Josh with GSA Focus. And thanks for watching, everyone.